Um, all right, I think we are ready to start. Welcome all to AarogyaSeva's webinar series, Speak for Health. And for everyone, I'd like to start by wishing a happy Makar Sankranti, Pongal, Lohri, and Bihu. For those of you who are not familiar, this is a festival in India which celebrates the sun. And I think all of us should be doing it considering we are freezing at minus, 12 degrees here. So it's a good thing to do today. And traditionally, this festival is celebrated by handing out jaggery, sesame seeds, coconut, which are all the perfect ingredients required by our body in this winter weather, right? So that's how it is. And that brings me to the topic of health that we're going to talk about today. Just before we start in, the series that Speak for Health is going to be bringing together people who share the passion, interest, and of course, the challenges that we all face in the healthcare space today. These conversations, I trust, will be dedicated to providing you with sessions that inspire and motivate you to make a difference in your community, and also to provide access to health and healthcare services for the community that you live in. And for those who are not familiar with AarogyaSeva Global Health Volunteer Alliance, we are a micro-volunteering platform that provides highly customized, progressive, flexible, and meaningful opportunities for both medical and non-medical volunteers to serve in the healthcare domain, bringing quality health and healthcare services to the most needy and marginalized communities. Access to affordable quality healthcare is still, as we all know, a very, very distant dream for a lot of people in many parts of the world. Our commitment at AarogyaSeva is to provide access to quality health and healthcare with respect and dignity. With that, let me introduce my guest today, Dr. Kaushal B Nanavati. Thank you, Kaushal, for being here. A very warm good morning to you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Kaushal is very well known in the Syracuse, Central New York area. He's a motivational speaker with an integrative family physician in Syracuse, New York, who enjoys educating people on wellness, self-care, and achieving contentment and peace in life using humor, stories, and real tangible examples. I'm sure we'll get to hear some of that today. He has been a contributing author in local magazines and has taught end-of-life care to physicians, families, and caregivers. He was born in India and moved to Rochester, New York at the age of 7, where he later went to high school at both Monroe and East. He then attended Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and graduated with a degree in biology and minors in philosophy and literature. He attended St. George's University School of Medicine, and his schooling provided him experiences in Grenada, St. Vincent's, Watford, England, and the New York City, Newark, New Jersey areas of the United States. For over 20 years, he has worked in rural, suburban, and urban settings, caring for all stages of life from birth through the end of life. Along the way, he has come upon some core themes about finding peace in life. His book, Core for Wellness, which I have a copy here, there's also a link posted which you can all take a look at, is a culmination of insights based on these pearls gathered from his life experiences. He began to write as he noticed recurrent themes in both his personal and professional lives, and was inspired by his wife to share this awareness with a broader audience. He has enjoyed learning karate and coaching his son in basketball, has completed a marathon, loves to play tennis and golf, and cherishes personal time with his family. Currently, he is a faculty at Upstate Medical University and holds local, regional, and national leadership positions. I think we're all very privileged to have Dr. Kaushal Nanavati with us today. And without much ado, over to you, Kaushal.
Well, thank you very much, Daya. I appreciate it. And yes, it is freezing cold in Syracuse, New York, but you know, we enjoy this. This is our home. And so as Daya mentioned, you know, some of us are famous in our own home, I guess is the way to say it. I'm privileged to be here. I think this conversation, the Speak for Health series, is a fascinating way to connect people around the world. And when we think about healthcare, we have to really think about what we understand. So let me kind of introduce myself a little differently to you. So as you see here, our topic is going to be shifting the paradigm by redefining the end game in health and healthcare. And he mentioned that I'm a doctor, but I'm also a husband, father, son, brother, friend, teacher, author, and speaker. And I work at Upstate Medical University as well. And the other descriptors are there also, working with Pep Talk Health and also with the Upstate Cancer Center. So I want to get into this a little bit, and I want to just clarify, again, Dr. Daya mentioned the book that I've written, which will give you more details about what we're going to talk about today, especially if you want to get into depth. But let's think about what we want to talk about today. I'm going to take a few minutes to give you some foundational information, and then we're going to have a dialogue. We have some people here with us as well who may have questions, and if online you have questions, please feel free to ask, and we'll try to address them as well. So we're going to try to view healthcare differently. We're going to try to understand what the core four of wellness really are, and how we can implement them in our life. And then maybe we might just blow your mind a little bit. We'll see. And so we think about the definition of healthcare. And what Merriam-Webster says is that it's efforts made to maintain or restore physical, mental, or emotional wellness, being especially by trained and licensed professionals. And that's their definition of healthcare. And what I would posit is, think about healthcare as a tree. Think about the trunk as being disease prevention. Think about the branches as being disease management. And think about the leaves as being innovations. Some become new branches, some fall by the wayside, right? But the roots are really wellness promotion. And if you look at it around the world, and even though we're in the United States, my addressing this topic today is really about the world. And Dr. Daya mentioned the disparities, the inequities, and the WHO says nearly 50% of the world's population has a hard time actually getting access to adequate health care. So when we think about it, wellness promotion should be the roots of where health care is actually focused. And if we build that foundation, you take a tree, you don't really water the trunk or the branches or leaves, you water the roots. And then the energy flows upwards to the other domains. So I'm not going to diminish the importance of disease prevention, nor disease management and innovations, because we need all of it to have a complete healthcare program, healthcare system, healthcare around the world. I think that's very important. So you think about wellness, you think about health, and we think about multiple domains. Think about the emotional, the occupational, spiritual, social, intellectual, physical. We can think about economics, personal finance, political wellness and health in a community. And I think about healthcare encompassing all domains, because if we ignore any particular components, we tend to get out of balance. And more importantly, we're not healthy as a community, as a society, as a biome, this earth that is. So we have to think about environmental wellness as well. We have to think about these things if we're going to be comprehensive. And this is the direction that I think we should think about when we actually define health, define wellness. And so what's health, right? How would you define health? I'll give you the WHO's definition, which is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So when we talk about disease prevention, that's still focused on disease. Disease treatment and management, still focused on disease. Many of the innovations that are funded primarily focused on eradicating disease, whether it be HIV, whether it be malaria, flu. Currently, we have this flu pandemic as it's being labeled. And the reality is, we should also think about optimizing people's quality of life, right? Giving them the tools to actually be self-sufficient so that they can optimize their health and wellness, regardless of their stage and station of life, regardless of their economics, etc. The point is, how do they get to the root of their health? And so, to slightly try to blow your mind a little bit, my definition. I want to redefine health. And the way I want to do it is for us to think about health in terms of the attainment of contentment and peace, right? And that can mean different things for different people at different stages in life. Contentment is not the same for me as it is for Dr. Daya. It's not even the same for us as what it was 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago or what it might be 5 years from now. But in the moment, what does contentment, peace mean for you, right? And if you're not there, what does it take to get there? And these two words, okay, a lot of what I'm going to tell you isn't my stuff. I can't take full credit for it. This has been known for thousands of years. The words contentment and peace, if you go to Sanskrit language, the Sanskrit language defines them, or they're defined as santosha and shanti, okay? Or where I come from in India, Gujarat, we say santosh. But santosha and shanti are contentment and peace. Santosha is masculine, shanti is feminine. Go a little further east and you got yang and yin. Yang is masculine energy, yin is feminine energy. This stuff is not new, folks, but we sometimes forget it. And the goal is to understand the history of health over time, to take the best of what's been known along with current language, current innovation, so that we can optimize the presence and the progress of humanity, right? And this is what we're talking about. These conversations that Dr. Daya is leading are meant to push us a little bit to rethink, what do we really mean? And so health, defined as contentment and peace in two words, is the fundamental retooling of the focus that we should be working on from the WHO, from the Centers for Disease Control in the United States, government agencies, societies, volunteer organizations, healthcare providers, and healthcare provision. And that's what I'm positing. And as we talk about this, think about the fact that acceptance and forgiveness lead to contentment and peace, right? And acceptance and forgiveness start from within, right? Because if we're not able to do that, then it's very hard to be in a domain, to be in a relationship, because if we're stressed or distressed, then that relationship is as well. So I'll give you a couple of points on that also, right? And when you think about, well, how do I do this? Life is pretty tough. It changes all the time. Think about life as a surfer on a wave. I think it's one of the most profound analogies that I can come up with, because for a surfer on a wave, and by the way, I've never surfed, okay? I may someday, we'll see. And when I say that, I'm sure at home my wife is thinking, oh boy, here we go, right? But the reality is, a surfer on a wave is an environment where the surface underneath constantly changing. That's life, right? If they stay, go ahead.
That brings me to this question. Incidentally, I have surfed when I was in Hawaii, and it's an interesting experience. If you're not up for it, then it can be scary. But to take it back to the contentment and peace and the tree that you earlier demonstrated, the root and the leaves, there is innovation on top. That reminds me of the current situation where there is a broad spectrum where there are traditionalist practitioners who are still very conservative, and then you have the younger generation who are the technologists, right, who are looking at innovation in the medical space, which is kind of blooming so much. How do you look at bringing these two together? Like you and I, for example, in this sense, are a bridge between these two generations, right? We're right in the middle. So what are your thoughts on kind of making building that bridge, rather?
So you're talking about building bridges and not walls, is that what I understand? Sorry about that, folks. Just had to give a little fun. But, he just called me young, by the way, or at least a bridging generation, so I'll embrace that compliment. And the reality is that we need all of it, right? So when you think about current technologies and current context, put things into perspective. The distance between the Earth and the Sun was known thousands of years ago and calculated pretty accurately. They didn't have the tools we had, but they had their own tools, their own awareness, their own knowledge. And presently, we're at a state where technology is advancing so rapidly, and yet even as technology advances, some of the awareness we're coming up with is actually consistent with a lot of what's been known in the past. And when we talk about this concept of the core four of wellness, some of the things we think about are innovation in awareness of nutrition, innovation and awareness of physical wellness, innovation and awareness of psychological impact of relationship, of life in general. This is where even the current technologies, we use things like apps on phones to optimize a person's mindfulness, to give them guidance and tools. We have a lot of ways. The biometrics that we're able to measure all allow us to be more present. Biofeedback, which is a modern current context, is actually about being present in the moment. But go figure, mindfulness is exactly that. Meditation is about that. Yoga has been about that. Tai Chi. So cultures around the world, prayer has been about that, right? So cultures around the world had over time figured out through the current technologies of their time how to be able to optimize that. And in fact, if you look in the past, the body was actually the optimal machine that they used for all of these things. What we're building with artificial intelligence, et cetera, is trying to come parallel to what the body already can do, right? Our best AI, our best technologies, what do we talk about? Google's AI, you know, challenging the functional ability to be able to be better than or parallel the human mind and the human condition. Now we're learning that the brain actually probably has 100 times more capacity than we thought, right? So we just scratched the surface with our current technologies, where this machine that you have, the physical body, actually has a lot of capability that we're not aware of. So why not focus on that and live in that present versus trying to recreate what you've already got?
That also means, since we're talking about paradigm shift, that means being open or being able to adapt to significant, if not some change, right? And that is a difficult process for everyone.
Right.
So how do you see using these tools in a way of bringing contentment and peace in your day-to-day activities to be able to embrace that change?
Right. And so with that, part of the issue is really an awareness in terms of how we educate people, redefine the terms. And when we redefine these terms, then the focus changes, not only from funding agency mechanism, government, society, but when people start to embrace this sense of contentment and peace, right? What happens is when you achieve that, you're already in that space. And if you achieve contentment and peace, you're no longer seeking. If you're not seeking, you're not living in distress, but in acceptance of. And when you start from a place of acceptance, and then you look to make change, even if you don't quite get there, you fall back to acceptance. If you start from a place of rejection or distress, and then you're trying to make change, and if it doesn't happen, you fall back to distress. I'll give you a quick story. Think about an Olympic athlete, right? I have many dreams of having been in the Olympics, though I never have, but these dreams are there, right? If you're an Olympic athlete and you want to win the gold medal, and unless you do, it's all a failure, right? Your definition of what success means. You train with this focus on the gold, and you're stressed. You get to the Olympics, you're focused. You may or may not connect with a lot of people because you're focused on that gold. You get to the starting line, you're still stressed because you want to win that gold, and you run that race focused on the gold. And if you don't win, you failed. But how about the Olympic athlete who's like, yeah, I got into the Olympics, right? Training with joy, making friends, learning from different people, different things, gets to the Olympics, makes all kinds of friends, having fun, gets to the starting line, and they're actually looking for where the cameras are. So when they're in that race, they're posing, right? And then no matter how they finish, they've had a great experience. That's life, right? When we live it in the joy of that presence, we experience life differently. Biochemically, the minute now, all of you in the audience and all of you back there, I want to see big smiles, right? Just for a second, fake it. I don't mind. Dr. Daya, fake it, please. Yes. You know what happens? Cortisol goes down, stress hormone. That's tied to inflammation, blood pressure, sugar, immune system, metabolism. And serotonin goes up. Serotonin, our feel-good chemical, right? Not only that, it helps with our digestion, nutrient absorption, toxin release. Suddenly, you shifted your whole presence just with even a fake smile that I know some of you did, right? So there's a lot of science and biochemistry. And while I use humor and I make light of some of this, the reality is this research is out there, folks. Even the idea of happiness, right? Sustained happiness results from something that comes from within. If your happiness is connected to that gold only, if you don't get it, you're not happy. If you get it, you're happy, right? So it's a fluctuating yo-yo kind of a thing. But when you have self-sustaining happiness, resilience, now what happens is regardless of the outcome, that journey has been joyful. And that is another shift in the paradigm. Right?
I just have a comment.
Yes, for sure.
Basically, you're talking about integrating the traditional methods with the modern innovation. And I think Dr. Nanavati is a good example because in chemotherapy patients, we are looking for the latest innovations in treatment. Mm-hmm. But we are also counseling patients about yoga, about meditation, so that these kinds of things are basically bringing a positive attitude and a fighting mode towards the disease rather than completely surrendering. It's like, oh, the end is near. So there is always, I think there is now more awareness in the medical schools here to incorporate traditional medicine so that people are aware of that.
Yeah.
So I think there is a role for everything, but I think people should be aware as to which branch of medicine probably would give them the best care. You know, that's where the problem comes.
Yeah, definitely. I think the question of awareness is there, and I think we'll come back to that when we open the discussion. I have a comment also to add to that.
We'll show a couple of more things just to keep maybe blowing your mind a little bit, right? So this idea of the core four, and actually this slide or this handout, if you're watching it, is actually available online. If you type in core, the number 4, fundamentals of wellness, this is accessible to you. And this is about that nutrition, physical exercise, stress management, spiritual wellness. I'm going to quickly go through some of this stuff. Nutrition, Harvard actually has an evidence-based food plate. They looked at all the literature and they continue to update this information. Think about what are the best ways in which we can eat and bring in nutrition that help to reduce chronic disease, which still tends to be one of the biggest causes of morbidity, illness, and mortality over time. So with nutrition, physical exercise, stress management, spiritual wellness, nutrition, bottom line, enjoy your vegetables, right? And again, depending on, one size does not fit all, depending on your health conditions. Sometimes you have to have some changes, but for a majority of us, the idea of trying to get 7 to 9 servings of vegetables a day, 1 pearl is all I'm going to give in nutrition. You can look at the rest at your leisure. 1 serving of vegetables is a measuring cup of raw, okay, about the size of this cup. And if you look at this, this is about peace. Or a half a cup of cooked vegetables. And within the vegetables, your cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, spinach, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, those types of vegetables actually have data that they reverse plaque in arteries. We don't have pills that do that, but we have food that does. They reduce inflammation. They have anti-cancer benefit. So it's important to think about that. Then we think about physical exercise. The World Health Organization has great data. Okay, and the United States has a Healthy People 2020 objectives that talks about it, that 7 hours of moderate intense activity per week versus less than 30 minutes per week, the people that got the 7 hours had a 40% lower chance of premature deaths from any cause. There ain't a pill in the world that does that, folks, right? Moderate intensity means going hard enough that you can speak in small sentences and not have long-winded conversations. Not so you're going to pass out, and not so you're going to have long-winded conversations. So it's relative to your age and stage in life, your fitness level, and it will change based on your fitness level. But it's not about trying to get to a number with your pulse, right? It's about where you are functionally. So that's important. Tai Chi, again, wonderful way to enhance health. But again, if people have arthritis in the hips, the knees, they have to be careful, right? Stress management, right? Very simple. Own your stuff, let go of the rest. There are 2 types of stresses, right? And I had one person who brought in 8 pages worth of stresses. And I said, okay, make 2 columns. Things that I can do something about, things that I can't control. And she came back, and 1 page was hers to own. The other 7 were the stuff on the shelves in her life that other people put on, other people take off, right? So think about this, simple math. We learned this before kindergarten for some of us, right? If you stress about a stress, you have 2 problems. Take care of your stress, you have no problems, right? 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 minus 1 is 0, right? What's the difference? How you operate with them, how you function with them, right? So again, I'm not simplifying the intensity of the stress that all of us feel in life. What I'm saying is we can address it, in a practical manner as well. And that makes a difference.
Right. Yeah. What this leads to is the importance of simple solutions that we have. It does not have to be complicated for it to be good. Simple things are always good, and I think that we see so many clear examples in nature um, every day, and a lot of us tend to leave out simple solutions thinking it's simple so it's not going to be effective, and look for complicated and more complex solutions. So I think here we have several examples of that, and then once again, if you would like to suggest any more of the simple solutions, feel free to comment and leave a note after the talk as well.
So Dr. Daya is smiling, right, with the word simple, because I've actually shared with him an example. One time a local institution came and said, we'd like to have a wellness program. And I said, okay. And so I showed them kind of this idea of nutrition, exercise, stress management, spiritual wellness. And the response was, that's all you've got? But the reality is, the breath is simple, and yet breathing right. How many people are breathing right now? How many people know how to breathe right? Right? When we talk about belly breathing, kind of the breathing that's used in meditation, deep prayer, yoga, etc., there's a science behind that. When we do that, the diaphragm actually goes down, the lower part of the lungs expands where there's more volume. You actually get more oxygen in and blow off more carbon dioxide. Again, a healing mechanism. Your breath, right? Free. You're doing it right. In fact, right now you just did it, right? So when we talk about simple solutions, the reality is, this is where healthcare is really very affordable around the world, and we're missing the mark. When we say 50% of people don't have adequate healthcare, we're talking about in terms of disease prevention, we're talking about disease management, but from the world of public health, we also have to focus on what those social determinants are within a community that can help people with their fundamentals. Regardless of the material resources that people have, we all have our breath, we all have our mind, we all have the ability to start to figure out what contentment and peace mean in our lives. And with children now, what we're doing is really asking them not what they want to be, but what do you want to contribute, right? What do you feel your purpose is? And that's good for all of us to think about, right? When you think about peace, think about these circles. Peace begins within, right? If you're not at peace, you can't have peace in any of those outer circles, your relationships. Self, couplehood, children, parents, extended family and friends, and everyone else. And I put children on the inside and parents on the outside because when they're younger, they're more dependent, and our parents are more independent. As that changes, you can shift your priorities, and your circles may be different, right? Again, I'm not saying you have to walk my path, but recognize contentment and peace in your life and embrace them. And when you do, think about a bicycle wheel, right? If you're at the center, all the spokes are your relationships. If you're not at peace, none of those relationships have a chance for peace because you're connected to. The minute you are, all of them have a chance for peace because you're connected to them, right? Which is easier, 50 or 1, right? Prioritizing that is very valuable as well.
Yeah. So I think just going back to the wheel, I think that what it reminds me in today's conversations that are going on, the debates around the medical profession, the role of a doctor in the society. Traditionally, doctors have been, in many places even worshipped equivalent to God because you're giving, life, you're saving lives. But today with the commodification, corporatization, even in India, I think people are familiar. There have been a lot of debates around the safety of medical practitioners, the future for doctors. What do you see in the contemporary world is the role for a doctor in the society, and where do we fit in this wheel?
Well, so he said doctors have been treated like God. This is not a halo; it's just my bald spot with the light reflecting on it. So please, I'm humbled by that comment. But the reality is, healthcare and doctors and healing and the healing arts have always been about public service. And so, we're public servants. But over time in society, because the role of the physician, the healer, was as an advisor, not only for physical, mental, emotional health, but societal health and wellness, oftentimes they were kind of the advisors to rulers, leaders, kings, etc. And so, there was a role that was assigned. But you have to reflect back again, keep it simple, right? Inside our body, we have the lungs, liver, kidneys, the heart, the brain, and we need all of them, and they're valued. And whenever one needs a little more resource, the rest of them are willing to share. But the liver is happy being the liver. The kidney cells are happy being the kidney. The heart cells are happy being in the heart. They function in their domain and they do their job, right? It's when you try to be something else or value someone as being more than, now what happens is there's inequity, right? And that type of social inequity sometimes leads to struggle, stress, distress, especially when resources start to become limited for a certain group, while others have either a plenitude or are devaluing those resources. And I think that's where healthcare providers can help reset policy, can help communities to understand the value of all within that community. Every spoke of that wheel matters for that to function. And so we should be valuing things the same way, right? And I'm not talking about political systems and economics, but at the same time, what I am saying is that when we think about the human condition, we have to think about the fact that we all have a value and we should value each other that way.
I think that, again, also is very, very relevant to a lot of our volunteers, all of our volunteers who work with AarogyaSeva, but also many other volunteering organizations where you see that it doesn't matter what role you are playing. It could be a small job of volunteering. It could be something more significant, but each of that has a value in that bigger picture. And each of us are contributing in our own way to make that picture complete.
True. And at the end of the day, you're not going to be like this with everybody, right? So, every relationship has an optimal distance, right? And the idea is sometimes if you're too far apart, you don't quite connect, right? If you're too close, there might be a lot of friction, right? But you find that right balance and there's harmony, right? And we can't always shift the other person's position, but we can adjust our own, right? And even in the same relationship over time, some days this is better. Some days this is worse, right? Ask my wife. Sometimes she wants to be here from me. And sometimes this is perfect. And I use my wife's example. I do have her permission, folks. I'm not going to get in trouble when I go home. But so that's very important. And it's not just me saying it. The universe, right, has shown us this. From the atom with electrons and protons and how they balance with the nucleus, to our solar system, to the way our own body operates, to the galaxy as a whole, the answers lie within, right? And the answers lie without. And when you think about a relationship, think about a ladder, right? The two posts are held together by the rungs. I put some of these words there as the rungs that help to strengthen bonds, maintain relationships, and we have to work on that over time. You can't just, water a plant one day and feel like it's going to live. You have to continue to nurture that, just like we nurture a relationship. And again, I thought I was smart in doing this, and yet there's DNA, right? Nature has already figured that out. The two posts, the two sides are held together by the rungs that actually are the foundation, the building blocks for our living experience. Nature is well aware. If we pay attention, we can have a better understanding, and that actually helps us to actually understand that being content with my content, I have plenitude within. If I'm content with that content, then in the context of my life, I can actually have a peaceful experience as well, right? And that matters a lot. It makes a big difference, right? As I was saying, within the body, we all have a job to do, right? Within a community, within society. And if we recognize that these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, this is where I do well, right? Then we find ourselves in our natural niche, and we're actually able to have joy in what we're doing, right? But oftentimes we worry that, but society will value this less, so I want to be that. But that's not my natural domain. So now I'm struggling to be there, which is difficult, and I'm not having joy, right? Which doesn't help. But if I recognize here's my value that I bring, and I'm going to live in my domain, I can be at peace with that. And that's something that we do less of because of what we have in the world, where we have limited resource and everybody wants the same, right? Everyone can't be the king. Everyone can't be the pauper. And in fact, we have enough resource on this planet to be able to support everyone if we understand distribution of resource and value people in their domains. right? Then that makes a big difference as well. Right?
And I think that reminds us what we always say in AarogyaSeva to our volunteers, that when we go in to serve a community, when we offer a volunteering opportunity, it is always a win-win for everyone involved. We are not a beneficiary going to help a benefactor. We're not a benefactor going in to help a beneficiary. In fact, if there was no one to receive that service, then what would you be doing?
That's right.
So wherever you go in any situation, each role has its own value. Each stakeholder is equally important, and we all will be in that win-win situation if we are sharing our resources and learning from each other and trying to work together.
And so giving begins with self, right? So the word Seva, for those of you who don't know, really it focuses on service. And so when you're giving with an open heart, with unconditional love, that's really the idea of not having expectation, but giving for the sake of giving, right? And so when you think about this idea, I actually watched a movie called Interstellar. And in that movie, there was an equation for time travel that wasn't being solved. And then ultimately, the person who figured it out realized that there were two constants missing. One was the effect of gravity. So you think about the law of gravity as being like relationships, right? And then the other being love energy. And when I saw this movie, I was like, that's kind of cool. But 2 months prior, I'd gone to my National Integrative Medicine Conference, and these, researchers and scientists from major institutions were talking about data, and they kept saying love is essential. At that time, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. But then I thought about Harvard, having done a study on men for 75 years, and what they found, they wrote a book on. And the main researcher at the end said, I can summarize it up in 5 words, and I believe he was a Britisher. And so he said, happiness is love, full stop, right? And the full stop was his British thing. But happiness is love. So in all these domains, that was found. And then I thought, well, cultures around the world over time, Hindu Gita, the Quran, the Bible, Buddhist writings, they all come to that same conclusion. But every next civilization, every next society, rather than embracing that as their starting point to launch to a higher level of awareness, we want to prove it for ourselves. And so we keep going in circles, right? Sort of like a teenager who won't listen to their parents. Not that my son doesn't, my son's pretty good. But a teenager who won't listen to their parents until they become the parent, saying the same thing. If we actually embrace that awareness and live it out, right? Then contentment and peace are much more achievable. And it's not just love. Unconditional love is a greater awareness. Because in that, in giving it, we don't put expectation on the receiver. And in receiving it, we don't put expectation on how it's given, right? How it's distributed. And so when we do that, relationship becomes much more natural. Acceptance of present state becomes much more natural. And this idea of mindfulness. So I have this slide that I just joke with. Mindful of mess, try mindfulness. A lot of terms, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, prayer. At the end of the day, a lot of that comes back to your breath, being present, being accepting, being forgiving, right? Embracing the present. It doesn't mean it has to be the best. It doesn't mean that that's where you want to be. But starting with acceptance allows you to then have a journey that's more fulfilling. And I think that makes a big difference.
So I think we have another 10 minutes to go before we open for questions. But at this point, I think I wanted to get your views on again, bringing back to the theme of paradigm shift. We are progressing at a very, very rapid pace. The amount of innovation the medical field has seen, I think, has been tremendous just in the last decade. Right. So going forward in the next 10 years, what do you vision the practice? I'm sure both of us will still be actively practicing medicine still. So how do you see medicine as we practice today? I think it's going to be changed dramatically in the next 10 years. What do you see that like?
I think for us, the practice of medicine, the healing journey is a way of life. So I think that's just going to be who we are. At the same time, where I see healthcare going, where I already see it transforming a bit here in the United States, but even around the world, is recognizing that the roots of that tree are really important. And so while technology moves further, while we explore artificial intelligence, robotics, even immunotherapies, etc. A lot of these things, as we explore technologies to distribute them, what we'll realize is that the way in which our mindset is, the way in which we respect the body, embrace the life's journey, will actually make a big difference. So if somebody is living in that domain of contentment and peace, right? If I'm contented in peace, I'm already at that place where now the next moment is a bonus, right? Is a gift. And if I'm living that way, then whether I live to be 50, 70, 90, think about this. Did the universe tell us that you should measure time in seconds, minutes, hours, weeks, months, years? It's a human construct. Between this moment and this moment is an infinite amount of time, right? How are you embracing it? How are you living that out? And if you focus on that, then you don't worry about what you don't have because you embrace what you've got. Over the next decade, over the next century, my feeling is that we're going to redefine health, as I'm talking about. I think we have to be able to embrace our journey on this planet, to be able to sustain ourselves, okay? There are people that have written about the fact that the human condition on Earth is like a cancer in a body, right? Some of the goals are similar, living longer, immortality, wanting to find the cure for the kill switch so that we don't die, very similar to cancer experience. And we're also looking for different, domains to dwell in, right? Seeking more energy sources, similar experiences. So yes, it's controversial, and okay, so I'm being a little controversial. Maybe you guys have feedback on this, and I'm okay with learning, being aware. I'm not saying this is the only perspective. What I'm telling you is, if we are content, if we find peace with our present circumstance, if we find that we're satisfied, right, with what we have, and that enough may be enough, then we live differently, we relate to others differently, we share differently. And suddenly we lift ourselves up as a community, right? A world community, to a greater sense of awareness, which has been known for thousands of years. Civilizations keep coming back to that same conclusion, not because they're ignorant, but because they get that awareness over time that all these other paths don't seem to get us to that space, and yet there are ways that we can do it, right?
Okay, so I think we will be concluding soon. Did you have any thing else that you wanted to share?
So what I wanted to tell people is, happiness truly is an inside job, right? And if you give from a cup that's full and let the overflow go onto the world, then what happens is, whether it comes back or not, you're contented with your content, right? So that's important as well. Let your passion and your purpose be the people you serve, right? If you think that way, whether it be your own self, whether it be your family, your community, the world at large, when we follow that path, there's joy, right? See that smile? There it is, on demand, right? It's there because he's living his passion, right? Love, a simple word, and yet when you actually apply it daily, it shifts the way in which you relate to people, relate to your own life. This, by the way, is Watkins Glen Park in New York State. At certain times of the year, this is a beautiful place to visit, and all year long, it's a beautiful place. Embrace your chassis, right, and keep your engine finely tuned. One person, and I think this is an interesting thing, one person came to me recently and said, I'm fat, doc. And I looked at him and I said, you're right, you're fat, right? And we both smiled, and I wasn't being insulting, but this person was eating well, exercising, peace of mind, contented, except for that body, and he wasn't embracing it. And what we realized was that maybe his minivan wasn't going to look like a Lamborghini, but it could function like one, right? His engine could rev like one. And so we talked about optimizing our health, optimizing ourselves, and embracing who we are, the gifts that we've been given, right? If 40% are roughly is genetic, if 40% roughly is environmental, the other 20% can be anything, the things that we have the ability to do something about, we focus on those. We don't get stuck in spots where we're not in control of that, right? The body does its thing, but we can optimize its functioning. And that's what he and I talked about. I accept that I'm flawed, right? I'm saying it on international broadcast, right? But that makes me whole, right? I'm perfectly imperfect, constantly changing, just like the waves, right? But embracing the entirety of that journey and learning from it, reflecting on it, respecting it, right? That makes a big difference. If you look on the left side of your screen there, the waves have ripples, the water has ripples. Right side is calm. To go from a state of agitation to a state of calm, sometimes all it takes is a little shift in the way we do things, the way we approach it. 1 degree of change. You don't have to go 180 degrees. Make 1 degree of change. And if you like where you are, stay there. If you don't, make 1 degree of change, right? And when we do that, what we realize is that the greatest wealth we have is peace. And the best fuel is unconditional.
I think that's a beautiful message to end on. We definitely appreciate how much peace is important in today's day and age. Also appreciate how important it is to accept what we are as the body and the mind and the living being, but also the society and the community, the one world that we live in. We are all one, we are all together, we are also connected. So, and we're all not geniuses, but we are what we are, and then we grow from there, supporting each other and living with peace and unconditional love. And I think that is the best way to stay healthy and to create a healthy world for all of us around. And before I open for questions, I think I would like to thank Dr. Kaushal Nanavati for being here on a Sunday morning.
Thank you.
All of you, the audience, for tuning in, for being here, sitting and listening to us, to Medinet, our digital partner, and Dr. Bhaskar for making the program a success. Dr. Mohan for facilitating the hall, and Syracuse University for being a gracious host. And again, once again, the audiences for tuning in and listening to us. Feel free to share your comments about today's topic, about what you see is going to be the change in the healthcare space. What is your message for change? And with that, I think we are open to questions, both here and I'm going to take a look if we have any questions.
So one question that's come up is, how do you relate contentment with striving for goals? And it's a great question, because contentment is a place of being present, and a starting point often, right? It's acceptance, it's satisfaction. And that doesn't mean you can't have goals. In fact, what I say is dream big, make it happen. First of all, dreaming is free, right? Second of all is, when we strive for goals, starting from a place of contentment or acceptance, then it's sort of like what one of my mentors had told me. It's like falling forward. Wherever we get, we've gone further than where we were. And so that's really important as well. And so strive for goals, have goals, but start from a place of contentment. And as we say, as I was saying with the Olympic athlete, enjoy the journey, right? Find the joy in that journey, because you're learning throughout, and that's very important.
We have a comment, Dr. Nirmal Gupta, thank you for watching. He says, it'd be nice to touch upon the anti-inflammatory role of happiness, peace, and meditation, as subclinical whole body inflammation is down to cause several lifestyle diseases.
So I think that's fantastic, because there's actually great data, and it was published in 2015, that 10 minutes of deep breathing daily actually leads to cortisol going down, a hormone or chemical, which specifically ties with inflammation, a hormone or chemical called DHEA, which is a precursor for testosterone and estrogen, to go up, and that may even have some anti-aging benefits. Then serotonin goes up, which actually helps not only our digestion, but our mood. Melatonin goes up. Melatonin helps with sleep, but also with our immune system, enhancing it. Dopamine goes up, right? So you can get doped up on breathing, right? Think about how we change the culture there, right? And then norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are our stress hormones, go down. So there is very good data that happiness, this sense of peace, the mindfulness and contentment have a biochemical impact that affects chronic disease, inflammation and gut dysfunction being thought to be the two roots for most chronic diseases. So when you look at other systems like Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, medicine from cultures around the world that have been around for a long time, oftentimes it's fixing the gut and the secondary inflammation benefits from that, prior to then trying other therapeutic modalities like herbs and those things as well, or in modern context, pharmacopoeia.
There's a comment on the role of music in healing chronic diseases from Dr. Shilpa.
So music is fascinating, and there are a lot of people around the world working on this. And actually one group worked with the British Symphony to come up with a whole music component that actually specifically has been shown in studies to lower the heart rate. So when we think about music, it's also relative, right? There are certain rhythms, certain vibrations and frequencies that have been studied to actually help reduce the heart rate, to help in the intonations, helping with inflammation. But it's also relative to your mood, your interest, your intent, your need at the time. So there are times where I want to rock out. There are times where I want to get down with the hip hop, right? And there are times where I want to listen to some nice soothing instrumental music. All of those in those moments can often give me similar benefit depending on where I am and what I'm doing.
And I think that also brings us back to your comment about being aware of all of these choices and being well informed to make that choice which is the best for you. There's no right or wrong choice, but making the best choice for you in that situation. And to be well informed to make that choice. If you are not in a position where you could be guided, have a consultation with you, for example, right? So being aware and having the tools to get the right information to make those choices.
And I think that's what comes back to that surfer on the wave, because it is a dynamic process. And we're all on that wave at different stages. But to be where you are, to understand that breath, nutrition, nurturing, self-care, and accessing all of our senses, right? So music affects, through sound, hearing, etc., sight, vision, etc., all of these things. Even green space exposure actually has been shown to benefit the recurrence of certain cancers. So if your screensaver is nature, greenery, that some data shows actually reduces the risk of recurrence. If you're in nature, even better. And if your hands are in there, even better. So fascinating that just being present in a natural environment. Right now we have a beautiful white carpet outside in Syracuse that some people get distressed by. But if you actually look at it, it's one of the most beautiful, serene experiences you can have, right? I could say minus 12 degrees, oh my Lord, what am I doing here? On the other hand, I could look at it and say, this is the most beautiful, serene setting. And the hormonal shift in my body, just with those two different thoughts, shifts my entirety of my being. Right.
Did we answer this already?
Yes.
Okay. So we have Dr. Bhavya from Boston. She's asking, how is integrated care in US as compared to India, especially for palliative care?
So I don't have as much experience practicing in India, but what I can tell you is, so let's redefine integrated and integrative. So integrated care is where different modes of services collaborate. So cardiologist with a gastroenterologist with a primary care provider, physical therapist, etc. Integrative medicine is the use of conventional plus complementary medicines, and complementary medicines are different than alternative. Alternative is the stuff people do instead of. Complementary is the stuff they do in conjunction with, that's guided by best known evidence. And I think in India, and especially in the major institutions, there's more of this that's happened over time. When you think about Ayurvedic medicine, when you think about mainstream or conventional rather medicine, Western medicine, if we say, there are institutions that actually allow for cross consultations. In the United States and a lot of the major institutions, these things are coming to the fore more and more as integrative programs grow. In our own institution, we actually have it in the curriculum so that medical students are actually being exposed to concepts of mindfulness, the importance of nutrition with cancer, the gut microbiome, a lot of these things that are also elective options in other institutions.
Just to add to that, I think in India, there has been a lot of integrative practice organically happening for centuries, but a lot of it is also ad hoc and unstructured and not streamlined. So I think it is important for us to kind of bridge that gap, bring these two together in a structured format. There's also recent controversy with the new bridge course that the government has proposed. So there is, there is a need for a dialogue between all the, specialties and pioneers from these spaces to actually come together, sit around a table and talk and find ways to build bridges. And definitely, as we all see it, integrative practice is the way forward, and that is what is going to, we're going to see more and more of that, not just in India, but I think world over. And this will not just be traditional Indian medicine and allopathy, but also other forms of traditional medicines that are available, like Chinese medicine, I think there, and various other traditions that have been there. And we will see a lot more of that in the days to come.
And there's no doubt about it. I mean, just use the example of probiotics, right? So suddenly now probiotics are a big discussion piece in conventional medicine, are being prescribed, multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Yogurt, been eaten by cultures for thousands of years. When you look at a lot of the cultures around the world, they'll even have buttermilk. It's not the stuff that you find in the cartons at the the modern grocery store, right? In India, it's water and yogurt churned, and then either you can put cumin and salt or some other thing in there as a digestive aid. In the Middle East, in certain cultures, they put club soda with yogurt with a little bit of mint. In Iran, they call it lug. And that's also a digestive aid. So probiotics suddenly have become a discovery in modern context, in modern technology, when in fact this was part of the standard meal in many cultures for eons, right?
Yeah. There is another comment around chronic healing and yoga, and getting more mainstream in India now. I think it is quite mainstream in the US in that sense.
So I mean, it's been around.
Yes, yes.
It's been around for a long time. And what happens is, if you think about it in the US, it's cyclical, right? In the 70s, it was a big deal, 60s and 70s. And then we got into these couple of decades or more, we were focusing a lot on disease technologies, and we use words like evidence-based medicine. And really now, in modern context, because we were the teenager that wanted proved in our language, there's more and more data coming out with randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials to show that yoga, meditation, mindfulness, in fact, John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction has been studied to even show benefits of restructuring the brain when done consistently over 8 weeks and longer. So we're getting it in our language now, so people are more satisfied. But the reality is that these things have been mainstream in many components, whether it be India, whether it be the Far East, whether it be the Middle East, whether it be Africa, South America, but people have done it differently. Walking meditation, prayer, group chanting and different things where they believe in the vibration of the whole, sort of like, the light from 100 light bulbs versus one. So these things have been known, but Western science, conventional science has wanted them proven in our language with what we believe are better techniques. And even that data is coming through. And if that's the case, then we're going to come back to the old. Right.
Did we have any questions in the hall? Any comments?
I just have one comment about music. Music therapy has been around for a long time. I heard a very interesting presentation about music therapy from Dr. Satish, who was a surgeon. He has actually done studies with his patients who are recovering from surgery he is a connoisseur for Carnatic music. So he studied various ragas. And he found Ananda Bhairavi to be very good for healing. So each raga, he can say that this excites this calms down. So he actually did a beautiful presentation of 1 hour about traditional Carnatic music, how it can help in healing.
Okay.
And we know that for Mozart, etc., that especially when using that when children are young, etc., for helping to calm the mind. So music from around the world has shown to have value.
Right. I think we are in our last minute. Dr. Mohan, did you have something?
In yoga and Tai Chi and even martial arts, sometimes we stress striving for control over distance, control over your body's responses, control over how to manipulate the opponent's attacks and things like that. I didn't see how you would combine that with your discussion.
Right. So
I think,
yep.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we can take that offline. We will close this just now. So once again, thank you everyone for listening to us. Thank you, Dr. Kaushal Nanavati, for being here. This is Core 4 of Wellness, his book, which is available on Amazon for any of you to purchase and read. Feel free to leave your comments. Tune in for our next episode, which is the second Sunday of February. You'll know soon what that is going to be, who our speaker will be. And once again, thank you all for being here and have a good day.
Thank you very much.